Jim Heron. Good evening and welcome to the April 6, 2021 regular session of Findlay City Council. We will start tonight with the roll call followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Mr. Greeno.
Present.
Mr. Haas.
Here.
Mr. Hellman.
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Russell.
Here.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Here.
Mr. Slough.
Here.
Ms. Warnicki. Here. And Mr. Wolkser.
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I hear a motion to accept the previous city council meeting minutes. Mr. Wolfson.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Slough. Any discussion? I'm sorry, there's two. Are you approving the public hearing minutes or the regular session?
I think you called for the regular session.
Okay. Regular session, second, Mr. Slough. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. We'll now entertain a motion to accept the public hearing minutes. Mr. Slough?
So moved.
Second by Mr. Niemeyer. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Those are approved also. Thank you. Mr. Russell, do we have any add-on, replacements, or removal from tonight's agenda?
Yes, sir. We have a two letters for add-on letter from Mayor Mern considering city income tax administrator interim appointment, and a letter from the mayor concerning the appointment to the airport advisory board. In addition, we have a replacement for ordinance 2021-021 as amended. And I would move that those letters be added and the replacement ordinance be replaced.
Second, Mr. Slough. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The changes are adopted. We have no proclamations. We have no recognition or retirement resolutions. We have no oral communications. We do have some petition.
The zoning amendment request from Brian Buck on behalf of his father, Bill Buck, regarding changing the zoning of 3 lots on Madison Avenue from R3 single family high density to C1 local commercial district.
Mr. Slough.
I have no objection be filed.
That goes to
That goes to committee.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Thank you, Mr. Slough, but that goes to committee. Thank you. It will be referred to the City Planning Commission and the
Moving that right along.
Planning and Zoning Committee. We have no written communications, reports of municipal officers and departments.
Officer shareholders disclosure form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for Main Street Deli of Findlay LLC, located at 513 to 515 South Main Street and Patio for a D3 liquor permit. The check of the records show no criminal record for those who applied.
Mr. Slough.
Now we'll try again. I move no objection be filed.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. No objection will be filed.
Officer shareholders disclosure form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for Twist and Shout Incorporated, doing business as Smokin's Buckeye Barbecue Company, located at 3050 South Main Street for a D3 liquor permit. The check of the record show no criminal record for those who applied.
Mr. Slough.
Move no objection be filed.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. No objection will be filed.
Officer shareholders disclosure form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for Twist and Shout Incorporated, doing business as Smokin's Buckeye Barbecue Company, located at 3050 South Main Street for a D1 and D2 liquor permit. Check of the record show no criminal record for those who applied.
Mr. Slough.
Move no objection be filed.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. No objection will be filed.
Board of Zoning Appeals minutes for February 11th, 2021.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
A letter from Mayor Mern regarding AARP Community Challenge Grant.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell.
Yeah, Mayor, what are we intending to use the funds for if obtained?
Oh goodness, we have a couple of different grants. I believe the AARP, oh, I wish Alicia was here. If I may, I will look it up on my email because I know I have it, and I will share that with you at the end. Would that be all right?
Well, because it's just applying for authorizing you to apply, generally we have a tendency to waive readings on things like that. So during discussion, if you have the answer by that, that'd be great.
I can do that for sure. I know we have a couple of different ones out there, so I want to make sure I give you accurate information. Thank you. Yep, you're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
City Planning Commission minutes of March 11th, 2021, as well as the agenda for April 8th, 2021.
Questions or comments? Hearing none, the minutes and agenda will be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Thomas regarding Ohio Department of Natural Resources Nature Works Grant Program.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from Safety Director Schmelzer regarding airport fuel release.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Mayor Mern regarding Shade Tree Commission appointment. The appointments do not require council's confirmation.
Questions or comments? Appointment to be filed.
City Income Tax Monthly Collections Report for March 2021.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Letter from Mayor Mern regarding interim income tax administrator,
Questions or comments?
and this does require council's confirmation.
Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to accept the appointment. Mr. Greeno?
Yeah.
Motion?
Make a motion to accept Mary Price as the interim tax administrator.
Second, Mr. Haas. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the appointment say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The appointment is approved.
Letter from Mayor Mern regarding Airport Advisory Board appointment. This does not require council's confirmation.
Questions or comments? Appointment to be filed. Committee reports.
Strategic Planning Committee met on March 16, 2021 to continue March 2nd, 2021 discussions on the finalization of an RFQ for a contractor to assist with the initial data gathering for the strategic plan. We recommend the following timeline. Mayor to distribute revised RFQ to committee by March 18, committee to approve or suggest revision by noon of March 22nd, auditor to forward to Baker Tilly for comment, committee to review
Final document.
final document and suggestions at April 6th committee meeting, and RFQ to be published by April 9th.
Mr. Wilson.
Sorry, you can't translate my writing very well, Denise. Just a quick follow-up on this for the rest of council and for the strategic planning committee. We had a meeting scheduled for today. We canceled that because we have not heard back from Baker Tilly yet. So we hope that we'll get that information back from them, have a chance to vet it and discuss it between myself and the auditor and the mayor. And then at the end of the meeting, I will reschedule the next strategic planning meeting for 5:30 prior to the next council meeting, which would be in 2 weeks. So we will have to redo this timeline, obviously, but when we hope at that point we'll be able to bring it to you, and we'll hope that you will accept and give us the ability to move forward with the RFQ at that point in time.
We need a motion to accept the committee report. Mr. Schindeldecker, second Mr. Russell. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Committee report is accepted. Legislation, we have no resolutions, ordinances.
Third reading ordinance 2021-19, An ordinance to approve current replacement pages to the Findlay codified ordinances and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slot.
Move for adoption of ordinance 2021-019.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of ordinance 2021-019 say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Schindledecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2021 as amended, 2021-21 as amended, and ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Wobser,
Move for adoption of ordinance 2021-21
as amended.
as amended. Thank you.
Mr. Greeno, second. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance 2021-021 say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Schindledecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2021-22, an ordinance authorizing the service director and the safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio to advertise for bids where required and enter into a contract or contracts for construction of various projects in accordance with the 2021 department equipment list, appropriating and transferring funds for said capital expenditures and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2021-022.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor of ordinance 2021-022 say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Schindledecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
And Mr. Haas.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2021-32, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to file an application for the AARP Community Challenge Grant, sign all necessary agreements and/or corresponding documents, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Question for the mayor.
Yes, thank you for allowing me a couple of extra minutes. So what we are applying for the AARP Community Challenge Grants, these are kind of like quick hit investments in the community. We are planning to do some benches as well as trash receptacles and crosswalks on 236, so along that new multi-use path that has been installed. So again, just trying to create a safer, a more inviting environment along that area as we can continue to develop that path out to Riverbed Park.
Mr. Russell.
Because this is simply us applying for a grant, we have traditionally waived readings, and therefore I would request that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2021-032 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Haas. All those in favor of suspending the rules say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Schindledecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended. The clerk will give ordinance 2021-032 its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2021-32, ordinance 2021-32.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 2021-32.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion. Mr. Wobser.
I just wanted to add real quick to this, the 236, the multi-use path that was installed out there. If you guys have, if the council members, if you haven't gone out there to see it, you should take a drive. It's actually being used quite a lot. Now with the weather turning, I'm very surprised at how much use it is getting. So I think this will be a good grant, nice addition to that property, and get or to that path, and it'll get a lot of use.
Ms. Mayor.
I was just gonna reiterate, so the crosswalks as well would be kind of at Lakeview, right there going into the Fox Run neighborhood as well as at Heatherwood. So I know that there's been a lot of improvement with the multi-use path as well as the park that has been established with Kiwanis and the Brook Locker I probably said that wrong. Did I say that right? Yes. The Brook Locker Memorial Park. So we're just continuing to try to create, paths for community members to be outside, be safe, and then continue to utilize that. So we have definitely been pleasantly surprised with the amount of traffic that has been on that multi-use path. So that's great.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of ordinance 2021-032, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Schindledecker?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Ordinance 2021-032 is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2020-33. 2021-33. An ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or service safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to apply for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources Nature Works Grant Program, sign all necessary agreements and/or corresponding documents, and declare an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
For the same reasons as the previous, I would request that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2021-033 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Wobser. All those in favor of suspending the rules, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Schindledecker?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
And Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
The rules of council has been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2021-33, ordinance 2021-33.
Mr. Wobser.
Motion to approve ordinance 2021-33.
Second, Mr. Schindledecker. Questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of ordinance 2021-033, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Schindledecker?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
And Mr. Russell.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2021-34, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Wobser.
Paul, I didn't get a chance to ask when the letter came through. We had a, I guess, big release, although it's relatively small in the big scheme of things. Do we have a functional breakdown? What was the ultimate cause of that? Have we determined how the fuel was released? Although it was all contained within the containment area, correct?
Well, it is not contained within any containment area, and that's why we have to go through this investigation.
Understood. Could you explain a little bit better, please?
Yeah, we have 2 underground tanks. Just quiz Matt. Earlier, they're 6,000 gallon tanks underground, and they're low lead fuel that feeds GA aircraft. And what happens is there's a hose that's connected to the plane, it's valved, and then it's pumped into the plane. When one of the planes was done being fueled, the valve was shut to the fueling line to the plane. Obviously, fuel was not spilling out all over, but the pump was left on. Now, in concert with that, there was an inspection done, which is annually done by a third-party vendor to certify the condition of the tanks and the valves and the pumping mechanisms. We firmly believe that the contractor left the valve between the 2 tanks open, because our staff has done this 1,000 times and has never left that valve open. They have also never left the valve open and left the pump on. But that is essentially what happened. So, freakish is a little bit too strong of a word, but very coincidental to have these 2 things occur at the same time.
Okay.
So what happened was the pump is running. It actually surcharged through the line that connects the 2 tanks, pressurized the other tank, and shot fuel out of the air vent of the 1 tank. Yeah. Now, shot might be too strong of a word too. It was very slow. It was over time, but it was like coming out of that air vent.
Yes.
So this thing ran for a number of hours before one of the staff people saw fuel coming out of that and then shut everything off. Since then, lockout tagout is now on. And the vendor is very aware of the issue that we had. Of course, there's no way for us to go back and say, we know this was your fault. So there's no intent to do that. To be honest, there's no way we could actually prove that happened. It could have been one of our people that did it, that left that valve open. But nonetheless, we had this release. Matt took immediate action and called a vendor so that we could utilize the existing monitoring wells that are there, and we pumped out as much groundwater as we could.
Okay.
So I think they took out maybe 2,700 gallons, something like that. Recovered some percentage of the fuel, maybe 10%. We're able to analyze what they got, filter it, and find out how much was recovered. So we reported that to Buster. Buster has a very Bureau of Underground Storage tank, and requires, under any kind of circumstance like this, a very rigid procedure for analyzing exactly how bad the issue was. So we had to install 3 monitoring wells relatively immediately. And then what we do is we're able to analyze the fuel content, a bunch of trihalomethanes and words that I can't remember, to see how much fuel is actually in the groundwater in the monitoring wells that were installed. As you can guess, because I'm here, it was above the recommended levels. So what they want us to do is expand our Tier 1 investigation by drilling 5 more wells. We'll have to monitor those, and then we'll have to take a look at potential groundwater flow in the Tier 2. Gotta kind of plan for the worst, but in the grand scheme of things, it was 400 gallons, so I don't expect any long-term implications with regard to operation of the airport, but we are going to drop some coin to prove that that's not the case. Okay. Spend some money.
Mr. Slough?
Yes, sir.
Does that, will that have any impact on West Park?
No, sir. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Again, I think Jeff sort of alluded to it, or Councilman Wiltzer. We got 12,000 gallons in there, 400 were released, 40 were recaptured, so we got about somewhere around 360 gallons. In the grand scheme of things, it's almost immeasurable. So it'll have no impact whatsoever on West Park. Ultimately, it'll have no impact on anything, even on the airport property. But we have a very rigid process that we have to work through.
Mr. Greeno?
Yeah, Paul, I know this was a freakish thing that
Yep.
probably would never ever happen again, but do we have any safeguards, like level sensors or anything put in these tanks so that they would shut the pump off if it got to that point again, if it ever did happen?
There's not a level sensor that's been installed because of this incident. There are measuring devices already installed so that we know what the fuel levels are. That's how we knew exactly how much fuel was released, and we were able to report that. What we have now is a lockout tagout on the pump and the valve, so that it's not going to be possible again for that pump to be turned on with that valve open.
Okay.
Mr. Hellman?
Mr. Schmelzer, is there any way that the company that was, I don't want to say responsible or implicated, to do some cost sharing on this?
I would say, if I was them, I would say no.
Do they appreciate our business?
Sure. And, there's nothing that says we have to use them again. But there's also nothing, and that's why I didn't even mention it in the letter. I have no intent of pursuing action against them because I cannot prove that it was them that left the valve open. I'm sure that in many of their inspections, they don't leave those kind of valves open either. So I wish I had a better answer, and I wish I was going to stand up here and say I'm going to recoup a bunch of this money from a negligent contractor, but it's just not the case.
I wouldn't expect you to do that unless there was some liability there, willingness.
Not a very viable pursuit.
Any other questions or comments to Mr. Schmelzer? Mr. Russell?
Is it imperative that this move tonight?
It is not. We have certain timelines that we're under, but this is not something that you have to pass tonight. It is not something that is going to obviously go away or change. The same request will be there in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We'd like to get under contract and get the monitoring wells done as soon as we can, but it is not imperative that it moves.
Mr. Wobser?
I think Councilman Russell brings up a good point. As I read Paul's letter and has gotten the additional information, I'm not seeing any reason why we would potentially stop. And I guess if somebody on council feels like we should wait on this and let it go another week or go 2 more weeks to our next council meeting, please let me know or raise your hand now. But otherwise, Tom?
I see no reason, with the knowledge that we have, that we shouldn't pass it immediately, but I think this is a thing, if it can wait 2 weeks, I can see some people are trying to cover it up and whitewash it and get it under the table. I think we should wait 2 weeks, but if the majority wants to pass it as an emergency now, I would not vote against it. I could just see this as a possible conspiracy problem with some of our less informed constituents.
Mr. Wobser?
I'll defer to Paul.
I have, like I said, no opinions on that matter unless there is some belief that the whitewashing is somehow associated with myself or the administration or Matt. If you're alluding to some other people, that's perfectly fine.
Mr. Russell?
If this is an attempt to brush something under the rug, Paul, you are
Terrible at it.
you're terrible. But I agree, Jeff, and if so moved, I would vote yes.
Mr. Wobser?
Paul, one quick question. So if we go ahead and get this suspended and appropriated tonight, we can go ahead and get the additional wells drilled. Are we able to go ahead and do that now, taking out of his budget? And we would replenish his budget at that point, or what's your financial plan here?
My plan would be to have you place the money in the project and draw out of that project to accomplish the goals that are outlined in the letter.
Okay.
There are a couple of variables that I've added in here. Monitoring well decommission is highly recommended. Based on what we find, Buster might require that. It's entirely likely that they will, so I put it in there, but there's a chance it may not. Additional wells and groundwater monitoring, when I alluded to having to create sort of a water flow plan amongst the wells, that's what that is for. If there were 2 things that we had a chance of not spending money on, it's those 2. I've included them in the budget. The other 2, tier 1 and tier 2, are going to happen.
Right. So you're giving us worst case scenario.
I'm giving you worst case scenario for tier 1 and tier 2, and I'm adding some additional, if they come back and say, hey, you need, based on what we saw, you need 3 more wells.
Yeah.
Then, you're looking at another $13,000. And we really won't know that until the tier 2 is done. Now, as part of this whole thing, I said, sort of paint the picture for me. Fast forward all the way through to the end and give me the costs. This is what I was given. So,
Okay.
Based on what the geotech engineer believes they will find, this is our worst case scenario. And there's not enough money in Matt's budget to cover this whole thing. So at some point you need to make an appropriation, and we should really create a project, track the funds in and out of it. And if we do get above $55,000, we can always make a claim, because our maximum exposure on this, based on the insurance policy that we have, is $55,000.
Right. Very good. With that information, I'd make a motion that council's rules be suspended and ordinance 2021-34 be given its second, third reading.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of suspending the rules, say aye. Aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
And Mr. Schindelbecker.
Aye.
The rules have been suspended And the clerk will give ordinance 2021-034 its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2021-34, ordinance 2021-34.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve 2021-34.
Second, Mr. Palmer. I'm sorry, second, Mr. Greeno. Any questions or further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of ordinance 2021-034 say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki. Aye. Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Schindledecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted. Old business. New business. Mr. Russell.
Planning and zoning on Thursday, this Thursday, April 8th at noon in the council offices.
Mr. Wobser.
Strategic Planning Committee meeting, April 20th, prior to the April 20th council meeting at 5:30 PM here in council chambers.
Any other new business? Ms. Mayor.
Well, good evening. I hope you all are doing well and were able to get out and have a walk during this beautiful day. Just a couple of quick items I wanted to follow up on, some that were in your council packet and a number of items that you should have received via email. First, I just wanted you to touch on one item. If you have received any questions regarding the gas aggregation program that we have within the city, there was a surcharge that was added by volunteer, and some folks noticed it on their bill. We reached out to volunteer and our gas aggregation company. Long story short, utility companies tried to recoup some of the money that they were losing in other areas when they had the crazy storms in other parts of the country. They tried to add a fee onto some of our customers' bills. We thought that that will be removed and citizens will be receiving a refund. So if you received any questions on that, just wanted you to be aware. If you would like more detail, I'd be happy to send that. But just wanted to let you know that folks will receive a refund for any charges that they received that were not part of our original contract. We do have a number of personnel changes. So we're settling in, we're finding some great folks. I'm super excited. Tonight, you did approve the interim appointment of Mary Price. She's an individual that has been part of our income tax department over the last year or so. Corey, who had originally taken the appointment late last year, has some personal issues going on and has notified me that he no longer is able to fill that position. He will be taking a lesser position in the department for the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be departing the department entirely. Certainly unfortunate, but we understand that life situations come up and folks have to make the decision that's right for them, and so we wish him nothing but the best. And we'll certainly work with Mary to make sure that the department continues to move forward. As I mentioned in my communication, Andrew Thomas, the prior income tax administrator, will be coming in on a volunteer basis just to provide Mary some additional coaching over the next couple of weeks. And then we will be opening up that position to do a search before we make the final determination, which is why Mary is in that role as an interim position. Does anyone have any questions on that before I move forward? Okay. Additionally, you received an email from Brian Thomas, the city engineer, letting you know that he has been recruited out from under our noses. That's why he's not here with us tonight. He's been recruited by the city of Perrysburg to help them build out their engineering department. And so though we are sad to lose him, we certainly are excited for him in that opportunity. And Jeremy Powell, who is currently the assistant city engineer, will be taking over as city engineer upon Brian's departure. We will be opening up the assistant city engineer position to find a new individual to support Jeremy and his department. And certainly Brian will be working with Jeremy and the team over the next couple of weeks to make that transition go smoothly. And I'm super excited for that team and for Brian in this kind of next adventure for him, and certainly know that we have a strong team in place. So I expect that to be a smooth transition as well. Any questions there? All right. Last but not least, We have a new service safety director that will be starting on April 19th. And we have Rob Martin, who has been an individual in our community for a number of years, most recently serving as the Chief and Director of Hancock EMS Services in Hancock County. I have certainly enjoyed my opportunities to work with Rob over the last couple of years and to get to know him a little bit better through the interview process. It certainly was lengthy, but well worth it. And so would love for Rob just to come up for a moment, if you wouldn't mind, to say hello to the group and certainly answer any quick questions you may have. But I think Rob is going to be a great asset to our team. He has been working with us over the last couple of years in his position with Hanco, in emergency response, community event planning, a number of different ways, and someone who certainly understands city operations, but our community as a whole. And it's just an all-around great guy, so I look forward to you guys getting to know him a little bit better. But Rob, if you wouldn't mind coming up real quick and
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rob Martin. Thank you for having me. I've been serving as the Hanco EMS Chief for a little over 8 years, so I've worked very closely with the city administration and other heads throughout the community. It's been an honor. As you all know, Findlay's got some pretty special things going on, and I'm proud to be part of it. I'm proud to serve this community. I'm looking forward to the next chapter in my life, being part of this administrative team. You know, going through the interviewing process, I've had the opportunity to meet with all the department heads, and I'll tell you, the engagement of this group and the energy and the talent that this city has that's running this community, or the departments, it's amazing. It's palpable, and it energizes you when you're around it. So going through this process, I was extremely excited about it, but after the days I got to meet with the department heads and understand, you know, the small portion of what they do, it energized me to the point where I'm ready to dive in. So I know I have big shoes to fill, so I'm looking forward to learning from him with the transition. I've worked with Paul on a number of different things over the years as I was at Hanco, so yeah, I'm looking forward to it, so thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you,
Glad to
sir.
have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Welcome.
Thank you.
and then just two final items. The vaccine rollout continues to go well. We have about 25% of Hancock County residents vaccinated. We are starting to get to the point where we have plenty of capacity, and so certainly if you have not already gotten your vaccine, please sign up to do so. I know that a number of our corporations that have medical staff are working to get their employees vaccinated on site, as well as we're working with the University of Findlay to get their students vaccinated starting next week. But if you have any questions about that process, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And then the final item, though we see light at the end of the tunnel and we're starting to get folks vaccinated, we are certainly not out of the pandemic. As we've seen over the past 2 weeks, we have seen a measurable increase each week. I believe the last couple of days we've seen 30 plus, and in some days even 50 new cases per day. That is concerning. We're also seeing an uptick in hospitalizations. Thankfully, even though we are seeing new cases, those are largely in the younger than 50 age group, so we aren't seeing the severity, but we need to keep in mind that it's definitely still out there. It spreads quickly. We're seeing the variants, and so please just continue to reiterate to those that you come in contact with that wearing our masks, social distancing, doing our daily health assessments is still critically important to keeping our community open, continuing to be able to move about our daily lives, but certainly protecting those that we care about, whether it's a neighbor, family member, or friend. We're not out of the woods yet. So we're moving in the right direction, keep our heads held high, but continue to keep in mind that we need to be vigilant. And it's going to take each of us making those decisions for ourselves to keep our community moving in the right direction. I believe that is it for me. Did anybody have any questions?
Mr. Niemeyer.
Has the city income tax deadline been extended like the state and the federal?
Yes, and we did do a press release as well as put that out on social media, so it has been extended to, I believe it's May 15th or 17th, consistent with the state deadline.
Thank you.
17.
However, I would note that the estimated tax payments that are due for Q1 has not been extended. That's consistent with the standard deadline.
Mr. Hellman?
Yeah, I'd just like to go back for a minute and compliment the mayor and the staff for the improvements that were made to 236, and the path that was there was commented on by a couple of the council members, and I hope that that's an inspiration to continue to do those kinds of things, because I think it helps this community in many ways. One, it's for health reasons, if nothing else, but I think it's an excellent addition to the city, and we encourage the city to look for more grants like that in the future.
Well, thank you. We certainly will and are continuing to find appropriate areas to put those multi-use paths in to create a safe environment, which actually does remind me, one final item you will see in the next probably couple of days. As part of the Move with the Mayor campaign that I've been involved with in the last couple of years, the city of Findlay has been chosen to be a part of a pilot program where there's, I think, 10 cities from across the U.S. that are being able to have what's called the Spark 360 platform. And we will, for all of our citizens, will have access to a fitness platform that they can track their fitness. It will integrate with your Fitbit, with your Apple Watch, etc. And we will actually be able to do challenges among different businesses, among just individuals, as well as among other cities around your fitness goals. So it'll be completely free and available for those who want to participate, no pressure, but just a great way for us to continue to encourage folks to be active and healthy and have a free way to compete against others and get some fitness information. So I'm excited for that, and that will be rolling out. I'll be sending information out here in the next couple of days. All right, thank you.
Any other new business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Grant, motion, second, Mr. Niemeyer. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? We are adjourned.
You gotta stay, Dennis.
Did you say nay?
He always does.
I like it here.